Well, hello and welcome to Raj Sabha TV. You're watching India Fights Back with the host Rajat Kain. Well, this is a show that gets you all the latest on how India and of course the world is preparing to fight against COVID-19 pandemic. In this edition of the show, we'll discuss the details, the guidelines issued by the government for COVID-19 mass vaccination drive, which is expected to begin soon. Now, as per the guidelines, nearly 30 crore people will be vaccinated during the first phase of vaccination. Pfizer, Serum Institute of India and Bharat Biotech have already applied for market authorization for the vaccines, and the vaccination drive will start once India approves emergency use of COVID-19 vaccine. Well, that is what is there in the guidelines. So first up, the vaccines will be offered to healthcare workers, frontline workers and to persons above 50 years of age, followed by persons younger than 50 years of age with associated or any associated comorbidities. And finally, to the remaining population based on the disease epidemiology and, of course, the vaccination availability. Well, to discuss further this very important issue of guidelines in details, we're joined with a very important panel indeed, including Dr. K. Madan Gopal, he is Senior Consultant from NITI Aayog. Dr. Anant Mohan, he is Head of Department and Professor, Pulmonary Medicine from All India Institute of Medical Sciences. And Dr. Suneela Garg, Director, Professor, Community Medicine from Maulana Azad Medical Science College, or in short, MAMC. Well, many thanks for joining us on the show. Let me start with you, Dr. Madan Gopal. Could you just give us the brief about what are these guidelines issued for mass vaccination? Sir.
Thank you, Rajat. As you have mentioned that 3 potential vaccine candidates have applied for regulations, the regulatory clearances. Side by side, the preparations are going on, and the government has come up with the operational guidelines. Once it comes to vaccination, what and how we will be doing this vaccination drive to cover all the population. In the first try, as we have rightly mentioned, that we would be covering 30 crore beneficiaries. That means we have to plan to give at least 66 crore doses of vaccination to cover all these people. For planning such a mammoth exercise, you require some written guidelines. Right. It cannot be that pace you should be having, you do this thing. It has to be some written guidelines so that in case of need, the state and the person down the line, they can refer back to the guidelines, and that there is no transmission loss in the directions which have been going from the center to the districts as well as down to the districts. Right. Essentially, after a lot of deliberation, these guidelines have come in. For the first time, we are doing a mass adult vaccination. So we have been having experience of vaccinating up to the adolescent age group, but for doing a mass vaccination of this kind, you require a specific kind of guidelines. And the guidelines which have been released by the ministry, they talk about all these aspects. It talks about just a preamble about what is COVID and this, so that anybody who is using this guideline for the first time, he will understand what is COVID and why vaccination is important. Right. It talks about the governance mechanism, that is how a multi-level governance mechanism has been institutionalized through this guidelines. Before that also this institutional mechanism were there, at the state level, the district level. Now we are taking this governance mechanism right up to the block level. Right. It talks about how, because it's not a single, the operational guidelines talk about the intersectoral convergence as well. Okay. If you look at this thing, because in the vaccination, cold storage, the transportation is involved. If you look at the vaccination site, you require some electricity. Right. So electricity is involved. You require a mobilization of the volunteers. You require the other department also. That intersectoral mechanism is also envisaged in this guidelines, and how to do that is also spelled out in this guidelines. And apart from that, the other thing which is very important, which has been highlighted in the guidelines, is the human resources. how much human resources are required, what would be the training, how you can build on the capacities of these human resources. That is mentioned in these guidelines.
Hmm.
After the vaccinators, then you require that how you are going to monitor the logistics part, right from the procurement of the vaccine to the delivery of the
Right.
vaccine to the beneficiary. For that, the COVID system is there, which is had already been debated in the one of your earlier programs.
Yes. Yes.
And after that, how the vaccine would be administered. That
Hmm.
is clearly spelled out. How will be the flow of the beneficiaries from one place, and how the beneficiary
Hmm.
would be looked after by, how the beneficiary would be registered, how he will be administered after administration, whether the how the person will get a certificate. That has been spelled out in these guidelines.
Right.
And the vaccination side and the vaccination room, that has been the detailed guidelines have been given, that the ideal situation, but it can be
Hmm.
adopted as per the local requirements in this. Then, apart from that, one more important thing is communication and the social mobilization strategy has been mentioned as a part of this guidelines, and that would be a separate thing to take over. But nevertheless, for the states, for the districts, how we are going to communicate, how we are going to mobilize, how the vaccine hesitancy, what happens in the case of adverse effects, that has been spelled out in this operation guidelines. The another
Right.
important thing for any vaccination of this sort has to happen, we have
Hmm.
to have a adverse reactions following immunization surveillance part.
Okay.
That
Okay.
that is also been activated in this guideline. That means
Hmm.
the what will the teams do if there is an adverse event following immunization?
Okay.
How a special kind of surveillance can happen to that, that is also built into this apart. And nevertheless, after doing all these things, the other
Hmm.
another important guideline is the monitoring and supervision aspect, which are already built into this. So all
Right.
these modules
Right.
are there, and the ministry is interacting with the states in propagating all these modules, having video conferences and others. In that way, this message is going, and these operational guidelines have been shared. So over to
Right.
you.
Right, right. Well, many thanks, Dr. Madan Gopal, for your opening remarks and just taking us through the broad framework of these guidelines. Let me open up the debate and have Dr. Anant Mohan. He's Head of Department Pulmonary Medicine from AIIMS. Well, many thanks, Dr. Mohan, for joining us. Let me understand first up from you, as Dr. Madan Gopal just mentioned that they'll also assess feedback as to any adverse reaction of the vaccine. Sir, considering this is disease primarily affecting lungs and of course other parts of the body as well, but primarily lungs. So, what are the things that one should be looking for?
Well, like you have already mentioned, the vaccination is going to take off on a large scale,
Mm-hmm.
and you rightly talked about the adverse events, and that is the primary thing which is looked at one when one is trying out a vaccine, and before actually approving any vaccine, the safety point is the first thing which has to be absolutely ascertained beyond reasonable
Right.
doubt. Of
Yes.
course, effects are there. Adverse events occur with any trial, any drug, any vaccine, and there is no exception here as well. We have yet to see the final results of all the trials of these vaccines. All of them are in different stages of trials,
Mm.
stage 2, 3. Most of them have given the initial results of a subset, or at least the initial results of the safety and efficacy of their vaccines to the
Mm.
DCAGI, based on which various stages of approval are in progress. The most of the adverse events are actually not very severe, as you must have
Okay.
also have seen. They are mostly local side effects at the pain, tenderness, swelling at the injection site,
Okay.
and some having some, mild fever, transient
Mm.
fever, mild body aches, muscle aches, and fatigability for lasting for 1 or 2 days. So these are relatively milder adverse events, which usually happen with most other vaccines also that are taken and that are currently being taken, especially in children. So a little bit of fever usually does happen when an immune response is being mounted. The serious adverse events are something which are pretty rare, fortunately, and but still
Mm-hmm.
they have to be looked at. For example, any neurological adverse events like myelitis was reported, or any allergic adverse events like recently you reported in the UK when they were given the Pfizer
Yes.
vaccine. Then
Yes.
the advisory was kind of given out that it should not be administered to people who have a known history of allergic reactions. So these kind of
Mm-hmm.
advisories will keep on coming as we gain more and more experience regarding the adverse events. But
Mm.
safety is paramount. efficacy may vary from one vaccine to another. Some vaccine may have efficacy of 70%, some may have 80, some may have 90. That again, we will see at the end of it when all the final reports are available. For protection, for prevention, actually, there is nothing really we can do as far as the prevention of adverse events from vaccine is concerned. All prevention measures have to be taken before a vaccine is approved. So that is the step where one has to be sure that it is reasonably safe beyond doubt, and then one has to administer it. Most of the side effects, fortunately, have been pretty mild and self-limiting.
Right, right. Thanks, Dr. Anant Mohan. Let me move to Dr. Suneela Garg here, who's Director, Community Medicine from AIIMS. Ma'am, many thanks for joining us. Let me start with you in understanding the challenges bit of it. Like the first happened, besides the logistics, the rollout, the one that is concerning the medical fraternity happens to be training of the medicine worker who will be administering, or to say giving these vaccines to the beneficiaries. You see it as a challenge, or this is something which would be adapted very soon?
You see, India has got a lot of advantages because we have a very strong universal program on immunization. And as Dr. Madan also mentioned, that we do always come out with the macro and micro level guidelines. That means what is going to happen at the ministerial level, what will happen at the state level, and what will happen at the grassroots level. But for that, capacity building is very important.
Yes.
And what we have to realize is that this is a newer vaccine and there are new challenges. And accordingly, our manpower has to be prepared. Both, at the central level, there is a central coordination committee and there is a national committee on immunization, which is chaired by Dr. Vinod Paul, and Dr. Madan is already here from NITI Aayog. And accordingly, we have prepared an exhaustive training plan. Now, training plan does not only aim at the medical personnel. We have to train whole lot of people. That means we are having, approximately, like say we have got vaccine officer 1. So vaccine officer 1, is sitting outside and he's looking at the list of beneficiaries, how many people are going to come and all that, because we are moving in an election mode. Vaccine officer 2, like when you go to the polling booth, your identity is verified and all that. So that is done by so that person also has to be trained that what are his roles and responsibilities. Now, third level comes a vaccine officer 3, who they are responsible for crowd management and all that. And simultaneously, the people who come after the vaccine, they have to be monitored for half an hour so that there are no adverse effects and all that. So those people are told about that, to look for, any acute pain or, look at, be attentive to the person's needs. Now, the fourth level comes is when the people are actually vaccinating. So, by and large, most of the vaccines are given by intramuscular route, but then we have to see the injection safety. That is important, and training of these people is important, along with the recording and reporting. Then we have also got the supervisors above that. So supervisors are going to see all of these with the help of a checklist, whether all these things are monitored correctly or not. So overall, when we are giving them the training, we are telling them not only about the immunization part and all that, but we are going to, tell them what the roles and responsibilities and all. And also we are going to tell them about COVID app. Now, this COVID app basically is which Dr. Madan said that this has been discussed in your last platform, but then it's a very comprehensive app. Again and again, we have to, give them orientation and reorientation so that we are very sure about the beneficiaries who are coming. And then we are also, making sure that they come for next time so that the experience of the beneficiaries is very good. So they go with that. And then at the same time, the important emphasis during the training is going to be on the risk communication. That means we have to tell them that myths and misconceptions have to be dispelled. So there is a lot of role of media also in this. So where, we sensitize our healthcare functionaries during the training as well. So monitoring and evaluation also becomes a very important part of the program. So our healthcare workers are given a comprehensive training. Ultimately, we will see that out of these 33 crores, how many have got the vaccine, how many did drop out, how many did develop the side effects and all that. But simultaneously, whenever we are giving any vaccine, the adverse events are, maybe there. So there is a tray which is there, which is to take care of the anaphylactic reactions immediately. So we prepare our medical officers and the personnel for the side effects also, immediately we have to take some action at the site before we transport them to the nearby facilities. So this is important part of these standard operating procedures or the guidelines with regard to manpower development.
Right, right. Well, thanks, Dr. Suneela Garg. Let me go off to Dr. Madan Gopal here and talk more about the guidelines and the broad framework. Dr. Madan Gopal, we just, as you also mentioned about the Kain, this app, Kain. Now, here, this is very important for, monitoring and evaluation as well. So, how are we going about it? Are we training the medical staff in it, or is it primarily for the beneficiary and the tracking of their effectiveness or the effectiveness of the vaccine?
It is only for tracking of the beneficiaries, as I understand. For regarding the efficacy and other things, that's a separate thing. That's a separate group which would be looking at that. The Kain would be essentially for the tracking of the beneficiary to the issuance of the certificate as well. Okay. So after that, the person has to be watched, he has to be followed. That follow-up will happen to the usual HMIS system, which is quite comprehensive. That is there. And you have talked about the capacity building. So cascade training plan has already started. So that means from the central level, the state level teams are already being made. The state level teams, in case they would be taking this training down to the district and the block level, and they would be training on all aspects, right from the booth management as we do for the election, booth management, right up to the entry into the how the entries into the Kain and the other electronic systems would be made, and how to report any adverse event to the particular team and how to manage that adverse event. So that kind of mechanism is there. And the Kain, it has evolved because it is not a 1 day or 2 day. The electronic vaccine intelligence network is already there. For last many years, it is functioning and it has been rolled out in many of the states. And most of the states, they are used to using this thing. Now Kain is an advancement on that existing system to include the beneficiary module as well as providing information about whether the beneficiary has received the vaccination or not, where the beneficiary would be vaccinated, who would be the vaccinator of that beneficiary, and after he has received the immunization, he would be issued a barcode kind of certificate. That all module is there, and so that anything happens, if he goes to any other place, one of the interesting and beauty of this, I think that portability module will also be added to this. If I am registered at one place, I can be taking vaccination from other place. So if that happens, then that means that if somebody has received the vaccination, looking at the certificate, he can get the second shot from the other places if the same vaccine candidate is from that place. So that kind of mechanism do exist in the Kain system.
Right. Dr. Anant, here is as we know that initially there will be certain groups, the ones which are most vulnerable, the ones which requires vaccination at the earliest. Now, given this gigantic procedure of mass vaccination in our country, how important do you think this segregation is for the most effective rollout of vaccination?
So when we are doing a immunization or vaccination of this magnitude, almost like a universal type, then one has to do it in a systematic and a stepwise fashion. And one will have to identify the high risk population who are most likely to be affected, and they are the most likely to benefit as well. And the whole idea is to break the chain of transmission, isn't it? So the people who are most likely at risk should be first vaccinated, so that the number of people getting infected falls down to a level when there is no longer any transmission of the disease. And that is why this grading system of the high risk population is very important. And that is what I think the government has already made. Highest risk will be for those who are the healthcare workers who are direct in contact with the patients, potential corona patients, and that includes all the staff, the attendants and all. And then, of course, it is the extremes of age, that the old age people, the people who are having comorbidities, which are known to be a risk factor for more severe disease and deaths. So in that way, they have charted out a plan. So that planning is, I think, pretty important because it is such a mammoth scale. One cannot just indiscriminately keep on vaccinating people without any kind of direction. So one has to have a direction and a focus, and then gradually move forward in that direction.
Right. Dr. Garg, one very important thing that we have come across in terms of logistics. Now, how important do you see the involvement of the local community, especially when we have such a program at such a huge scale, given there are at times, certain things are bound to be confronted by misinformation as well, ma'am? How important then the local community gets? Yeah.
You see, community is the most important stakeholder because they are the ones who are the recipients. Ultimately, everybody belongs to the community. So it is very, very important to have responsible communication and to gain their support. So whenever the vaccination program is being organized in a particular thing, they should be aware of that. And simultaneously, we have to see the community preparedness also. So here we are not only involving the active members from the community, but Panchayati Raj institutions, urban local bodies, the representatives, and municipal bodies and all that. So that is where there's a comprehensive involvement of all the segments of the community. Whether we talk of other bodies which are there like Lions, Rotaries and all that, all of them have got a very, very important role to play in this whole mammoth exercise, so that not only they help in facilitating the program, but they help in dispelling myths and misconceptions. And now also I see that various institutions have come out with a lot of innovative, materials which removes, the myths and misconceptions from minds of people. And at this stage, it is very important, as has been pointed out, that we will be dealing with various kinds of vaccines. Some vaccines will be live, some will be on messenger platforms, and some will be the protein-based vaccines and all that, which will require different degrees of, even temperature also. So you see, I see that not only the community part, which you said, but involvement of paramilitary forces in safe transfer of the vaccines, because we want to give community a vaccine which is a potent vaccine, which is preserved at right temperature. And then also even if, once the vaccine is completed, we must make sure that the person goes back with the right kind of information. So here comes the role of volunteers also from the community, like NSS and all. We are roping in for that. So I think, any immunization program is a community program. So this is where we need to play a 360-degree role in involvement of all segments of community, so that we are successful in this immunization program. Ultimately, our success is determined in terms of that people come back for the second dose and they go satisfied with the first dose.
Right. Very important 360-degree involvement of community members and every person in a given locality, so as this program achieves success. Dr. Madan Gopal, as we about to close the program, let me ask you one rather hypothetical question here. So as among the guidelines, we already have a target group, and then after that, the second target group that needs to be given vaccination at the first. Will there be assessment of further vaccination once we are convinced that we have broken the chain? What I mean to ask here is, rather in very oversimplified manner, will all of us need vaccination?
If you understand the epidemic response, one of the things which has been highlighted is why we want vaccine. Either you get infected and get herd immunity, or you get vaccine or get herd immunity, so that the chain of transmission stops. That's one thing. Second objective of vaccination is you want to avert the deaths, avert mortality, as well as reduce the risk of infection. These are two things. If you look at the data which is coming, even after vaccination, that means the immunity status will only increase after 2 shots of the vaccination, 15 days after the vaccine. Till that time, the universal masking and other things and the COVID appropriate behavior has to be in place. That's one thing. Even if cases are coming, till the time the infection comes to a minimal transmission level, we have to vaccinate all the priority groups till we achieve a kind of herd status in the community. Till such time, vaccination is required. You and me both would have to go for vaccination. It's not that somebody will take vaccination. No, either you get infected or you take vaccination and get yourself immunized. That's the only thing.
Right.
So till such time, even after vaccination also, we have to exhibit COVID appropriate behavior at least for after the second dose for at least 2-3 weeks after that, so that we feel that yes, now the proper antibodies have developed in our body and we can't get infection. Till this time, it's not that vaccination is there, it's a magic remedy, and if I get vaccinated today, I will get no infection. You have to get 2 shots of vaccination as per the candidates which are available. After that also it takes time. That means at least 2 to 3 weeks for getting an antibody titer. Till such time you have to have some this COVID appropriate behavior. That's the only thing. You can't escape that thing.
Well, many thanks Dr. Madan Gopal, and also many thanks Dr. Anant, Mohan and Dr. Suneela Garg. We'll keep coming back to you for further insights into the guidelines as we go past each day and near the rolling out date for the vaccine as and when it's cleared by the government and of course by the scientific community. Well, many thanks for joining us, and to all our viewers, as our experts in the program just mentioned that we need to follow COVID appropriate behavior even after the vaccination. So clearly here is an appeal by RSTV to all our viewers. Please follow these small little things. Keep wearing your face mask. Wash your hands regularly and maintain physical distance. Now, these are 3 small yet important things required to counter and defeat the pandemic. Many thanks for joining us and watching this edition of COVID-19 India Fights Back. We'll come back again with new topic and new set of experts who will guide us further on how we fight this pandemic. Thanks.